The rain hammered against the windows like it was trying to warn me of something. I'd been at the gallery late, finalizing details for my upcoming exhibition, completely lost in the familiar comfort of work. Now, standing in the entryway of my own home, something felt wrong. I noticed them immediately. A pair of heels I didn't recognize, carelessly kicked off by the staircase. Small, expensive, not mine. My stomach twisted as I set my portfolio down, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. A friend visiting Stephen? At 11 p.m. on a Tuesday? "Stephen?" I called out, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Silence answered me, but not complete silence. There was a muffled sound coming from upstairs. Our bedroom. I should have turned around, should have walked back out into the rain, called someone, gone anywhere else. Instead, I moved toward the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The rational part of my brain was already piecing it together, but some deeper part of me needed to see it, needed the wound to be real before I could believe it. 3 months ago, Stephen had surprised me with a weekend getaway for our 5th anniversary. "To the woman who makes every day an adventure," he'd said, sliding a delicate bracelet onto my wrist. I twisted it now as I climbed the stairs, the metal suddenly cold against my skin. Our bedroom door wasn't fully closed. A sliver of light spilled into the hallway, along with sounds I wouldn't mistake. I pushed the door open. Time fractured. I registered details in disjointed flashes: tangled sheets, discarded clothes, my husband's back, and beneath him, Hannah, my best friend since college, the person who'd helped me pick out my wedding dress. They didn't notice me immediately. I stood there, rain still dripping from my coat onto the hardwood floor. When they finally saw me, the moment stretched like pulled taffy. Hannah's eyes widened first, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Stephen scrambled backward, grabbing at sheets. "Allison!" His voice cracked. "This isn't— Don't!" The word came out surprisingly steady. "Don't insult me by saying it isn't what it looks like." Hannah was crying now, tears streaming down her flushed face. "Allie, please!" "How long?" I asked, my voice hollow. Stephen looked at Hannah, a glance that told me everything. This wasn't the first time. This was established. Routine. 6 months, he finally said. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of working late and meeting clients. Of Hannah coming over for wine nights, asking about my marriage, listening to my hopes and insecurities while sleeping with my husband. "Allie, we never meant to hurt you," Hannah said, clutching the sheet to her chest. "It just happened." I laughed, the sound sharp and unfamiliar. "Things don't just happen for half a year, Hannah." Stephen stood, wrapping the sheet around his waist. "We need to talk about this. Calmly." "Calmly?" I repeated. "You want me to be calm right now?" My eyes caught something on the nightstand. My nightstand. A bottle of the massage oil Stephen had given me for my birthday 2 months ago. They'd been using my things, in my bed. The bed I'd picked out, arguing with Stephen for weeks about memory foam versus springs. A strange clarity washed over me. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was just observing, like I was outside my body, watching someone else's life implode. "I'll go," Hannah whispered, clutching her clothes to her chest. "No," I said. "The bed is yours now, both of you." I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls. In the hallway, I paused at the small decorative table where we kept our spare keys and mail. Behind the ceramic bowl was the tiny camera I'd installed last week when I first noticed Hannah's perfume on our sheets. I'd told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself the late nights and changed passwords and sudden gym memberships had innocent explanations. I slipped the memory card from the camera into my pocket. 3 hours of footage that would confirm what I already knew. This wasn't a mistake or a one-time thing. This was calculated. This was betrayal with eyes wide open. Outside, the rain had stopped, but I was already soaked through. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, not yet turning the key. Through the windshield, I could see our bedroom lights still on, their shadows moving behind the curtains. 5 years of marriage, 15 years of friendship, all of it meaningless. My phone lit up with Steven's face. I declined the call and opened my messages instead. Maria, my gallery curator, had texted, "The space is yours whenever you need it, no questions asked." I started the car. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew what I was leaving behind. And I knew, with sudden, terrifying certainty, that I wouldn't be the only one destroyed by this night. I spent the night at Maria's loft above the gallery, curled on her leather couch, staring at the exposed brick wall until dawn broke. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a glass of bourbon and a blanket. That's why I'd gone to her, instead of anyone else. Maria understood the value of silence. Morning light streamed through the industrial windows as I sat cross-legged on the floor, my laptop open to the video I couldn't stop watching. The third replay wasn't any easier than the first. "You should delete that," Maria said, setting a mug of coffee beside me. "Watching it is just self-torture." "It's evidence," I replied, not looking up. On screen, Hannah laughed at something Steven said, her hand trailing down his chest with practiced familiarity. They moved together with the ease of lovers who knew each other's bodies well. 6 months, maybe longer. "Evidence for what?" Maria asked, her voice gentle but firm. "Divorce doesn't require proof of infidelity anymore, Allison." I closed the laptop. "It's not about the divorce." Maria studied me, her dark eyes narrowing slightly. At 45, she'd navigated her share of personal disasters, which made her neither easily shocked nor easily fooled. "Be careful," she finally said. "Revenge feels good in theory." "This isn't about revenge." The lie tasted metallic. "I just need to understand what happened." My phone buzzed for the 20th time since morning. Steven again. I silenced it without looking at the message. "Your exhibition opens in 3 weeks," Maria reminded me. "If you need to postpone—" "No!" The word came out sharper than I intended. "The show goes on. I need the work now more than ever." My exhibition, Fractured Intimacies, had been in development for over a year. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been creating art about the hidden cracks in personal relationships while my own was splintering without my knowledge. I showered and borrowed clothes from Maria, grateful they fit despite our different builds. By noon, I felt human enough to check my messages. 14 texts from Steven, all variations of "we need to talk" and "please come home." 5 from Hannah, each more desperate than the last. The final one made my stomach turn. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We were going to tell you together. Please let me explain." They were going to tell me? As if that somehow made their betrayal more palatable? I deleted all their messages and blocked both numbers. My studio was a 15-minute walk from the gallery. I needed the physical space, somewhere that had never been contaminated by either of them. The familiar smell of paint and turpentine hit me as I unlocked the door, and for the first time since last night, I took a full breath. I stood before my half-finished canvas, a large-scale piece depicting intertwined figures, partially obscured by layers of translucent color. I'd been stuck on it for weeks. Now I knew why. My subconscious had been processing what my conscious mind refused to see. I grabbed a wide brush, dipped it in crimson, and slashed it across the canvas. That's one way to handle creative block. I whirled around. Tyrese stood in the doorway, a coffee carrier in one hand. A fellow artist with studio space down the hall. He'd become a friend over the past year, though I'd kept him at the careful distance I maintained with most people. "Sorry," he said, stepping inside. Door was ajar, brought caffeine as a peace offering. I accepted the cup, grateful for the distraction. "Thanks. That looks cathartic." He nodded toward my canvas. "My husband is sleeping with my best friend," I said flatly. "Has been for months." Tyrese didn't offer platitudes or awkward sympathy. He just nodded and said, "That explains the murder scene you're creating?" A laugh escaped me, sharp and unexpected. "I'm considering actual murder as Plan B." "What's Plan A?" I stared at the ruined canvas. "I haven't decided yet." My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost ignored it until I realized it might be Steven or Hannah calling from another phone. I answered with a curt, "Hello? Mrs. Webb? This is Janine from First National Bank. We've detected unusual activity on your joint accounts and credit cards. Multiple large withdrawals and transfers over the past 24 hours. The room tilted. How much? The checking account has been emptied. $42,000. And there's a pending wire transfer from your investment account for $175 is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I gripped the edge of my work table. Block everything, right now. After ending the call, I looked up to find Therese watching me with concern. They're taking my money, I said, my voice eerily calm. All of it. Your husband? Aunt and Hannah. The pieces clicked into place. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to leave, together, with everything I have. I opened my laptop and logged into my email. There it was, a message from Stephen sent at 3 a.m. We need to talk about separating our finances. This doesn't have to get ugly. Too late. Tyrese set his coffee down. What do you need? I looked up at him, something cold and determined settling in my chest. Do you still have that friend who works in cybersecurity? Allison. They're trying to destroy me, Tyrese, and they've been planning it for months. I pulled up the bank statement, showing withdrawal after withdrawal, each one a deliberate act of theft. I'm not going to let them. The grief that had numbed me since last night crystallized into something harder, sharper. I want everything they took from me, and then I want them to lose everything they have. The espresso machine hissed and sputtered, filling Tyrese's kitchen with the rich aroma of coffee. 3 days had passed since I discovered Stephen and Hannah's betrayal, and I hadn't slept more than a few hours at a stretch. My body felt wired, running on caffeine and rage. You look like hell, Tyrese said, sliding a mug across the counter. Thanks, I'm going for a specific aesthetic. I took a sip, letting the bitter heat ground me. Did your friend call? Tyrese nodded. Javier can meet us this afternoon. But Allison, are you sure about this? Once we cross certain lines. They crossed the line first. I pulled out my phone and showed him the latest email from the bank. They managed to transfer $30,000 before I froze everything. My lawyer says it could take months to recover. And your lawyer also said to document everything and let the courts handle it. I know. I set my mug down harder than necessary. But the courts won't get back the years I wasted. They won't erase the humiliation. Tyrese studied me, concern etched across his features. We'd grown closer over the past few days, my temporary residence on his couch, creating an unexpected intimacy. He'd seen me at my lowest, sobbing in the shower at 3 a.m., throwing a wine glass against the wall when another of Hannah's messages came through. I'm not talking about breaking laws, I clarified. I just want information. Knowledge is power, right? Right, he said, not sounding convinced. And after we get this information? I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to say out loud what I was planning. Javier's office was in a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of place that screamed tech startup with its exposed ductwork and standing desks. He greeted Tyrese with a fist bump before turning to me with a sympathetic smile. Tyrese filled me in on the basics, he said, gesturing for us to sit. Cheating husband, backstabbing friend, financial fuckery, the unholy trinity. That about covers it, I said. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? Javier asked, fingers already dancing across his keyboard. I need to know what they're planning. They've been coordinating for months. There must be emails, messages, something that shows the full extent. Javier nodded. Accessing private communications is legally questionable, but he held up a hand when I started to protest. There are ways to recover data from accounts you legitimately have access to. Joint cloud storage, shared devices, that sort of thing. I thought about the iPad Stephen and I both used, the cloud storage where we kept family photos and documents. We have several shared accounts. Start there, Javier suggested. You'd be surprised what people forget to delete. For the next hour, we combed through digital breadcrumbs. Most revealed nothing beyond the mundane details of daily life. Then I found it, a folder buried in our cloud storage titled Property Documents. This is new, I said, clicking it open. Inside were photos of a beachfront property in Costa Rica, along with mortgage pre-approval paperwork dated 3 months ago. Both Stephen and Hannah's names were on the documents. They were buying a house together, I whispered. In another country. Javier whistled low. That's not just an affair, that's an exit strategy. My hands shook as I scrolled through more files. Visa applications, information on Costa Rica's residency requirements, a spreadsheet detailing the liquidation of assets. My assets. There's more, Javier said, pointing to a subfolder labeled A-Day. Inside was a detailed timeline spanning 6 months. The final entry read, A-Day, May 15th. Exhibition opening. Confrontation. Financial transfers complete. May 15th. My exhibition opening. They had planned to blindside me on the most important night of my career, when I'd be surrounded by critics, collectors, and peers. They were going to humiliate me publicly, I said, my voice hollow, then disappear with my money while I was dealing with the fallout. Tyrese put his hand on my shoulder. At least now you know. Knowledge is power, Javier echoed my earlier words. Question is, what are you going to do with it? Back at Tyrese's apartment, I sat cross-legged on the couch, staring at the copies we'd made of everything we found. You're quiet, Tyrese observed, handing me a glass of wine. I'm thinking. I took a sip. About what Maria said regarding my exhibition. That you should postpone? That the show goes on. I set the glass down. But with modifications. Tyrese raised an eyebrow. What kind of modifications? Art is about truth, right? About revealing what's hidden? I pulled out my sketchbook. My exhibition is called Fractured Intimacies. It's already about the secrets people keep from those closest to them. Understanding dawned on Tyrese's face. You're going to use your show. They wanted to destroy me on opening night. I began sketching rapidly, ideas flowing faster than I could capture them. Instead, I'll be ready for them. That's still 6 weeks away, Tyrese pointed out. What about until then? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stephen again, using a friend's phone. Please come home. We need to talk. I can explain everything. I showed Tyrese the message. Until then, I play along. I let them think I'm devastated but manageable. Just another heartbroken wife they can manipulate. Are you sure you can do that? Face them and pretend? The question hit a nerve. Could I look into the eyes of the two people who had systematically betrayed me and not reveal what I knew? The thought made my stomach turn. I have to, I said, more to convince myself than him. Their plan only works if I react exactly how they expect me to. So I'll give them what they want. A wounded, emotional target, while I prepare something they'll never see coming. Tyrese studied me for a long moment. You know, when we first met, I thought you were this reserved, cautious person. I'm starting to think that was just another canvas you were hiding behind. I looked down at my sketch, a gallery installation taking shape, one that would expose every lie, every betrayal, every secret plan. Maybe we're all hiding something. The difference is, I'm about to put it all on display. I stared at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror of my studio. The fissure ran diagonally across the glass, splitting my face into mismatched halves. Fitting. I barely recognized myself anymore. You can still back out, I whispered to my reflection. In an hour, I'd be sitting across from Stephen at the upscale restaurant he'd suggested for our talk. After a week of dodging his calls, I'd finally agreed to meet. Part of my plan, I told myself. Reconnaissance. My phone buzzed with a text from Therese. Remember, information gathering only. Don't show your hand. I applied another coat of mascara, deliberately making myself look more put together than I felt. Stephen always underestimated me when I looked polished, as if external composure meant internal weakness. Tonight, I'd use that assumption against him. The restaurant was Stephen's kind of place, expensive enough to impress, with lighting dim enough to hide sins. He stood when he saw me, his face a careful mask of contrition. I'd seen that expression before, after smaller betrayals, forgotten anniversaries, Cancelled plans, harmless flirtations. Never had it covered something of this magnitude. "Allison," he said, reaching for my hands across the table. I let him take them, fighting the urge to recoil. "Thank you for coming. You didn't leave me much choice." I kept my voice neutral. 27 calls and texts tends to wear a person down. He winced. "I know I've been pushy. I needed to explain." "Explain what, exactly? The affair or the money you stole?" "It wasn't stealing," he said quickly. "Those are our joint accounts." "Were our joint accounts. Everything's frozen now." Anger flashed across his face before he controlled it. "That's extreme, don't you think? We should be able to discuss this like adults." Like the adults who were planning to empty my accounts on the night of my exhibition? I hadn't meant to reveal I knew about their timeline. A tactical error. Stephen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who have you been talking to?" "The bank, Stephen. They called me about unusual activity." I took a sip of water, buying time to recalibrate. "Where's Hannah tonight? I'm surprised you two aren't joined at the hip." "This isn't about Hannah." "Isn't it? You've been sleeping with my best friend for months, planning a future with her. That makes it very much about Hannah." The waiter approached, and Stephen ordered wine without consulting me, always making decisions on my behalf. I used to find it charming. Now I recognized it as control. "I never meant to hurt you," he said after the waiter left. "Things with Hannah, they just happened." "Things don't just happen for 6 months, Stephen. They're planned, maintained, chosen repeatedly." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Our marriage was already in trouble, Allison. You know that. All those late nights at your studio, the emotional distance. You checked out long before Hannah entered the picture." The familiar tactic, shifting blame, rewriting history. I'd expected it, but it still stung. "So your solution was to sleep with my best friend, rather than talk to me?" I kept my voice steady. "To plan a secret escape to Costa Rica with my money?" His eyes widened fractionally. "Confirmation." "I don't know what you think you know," he said carefully. "But I'm trying to be fair here. Half the assets are mine. Half of what we built together is yours," I corrected. "Not half of my inheritance, or the proceeds from my art sales before we were married, which is what you were transferring." The wine arrived. Stephen took a long sip, recalculating. "I made a mistake," he finally said. "A terrible mistake. But I still care about you, Allison. I want to make this as painless as possible. By taking everything I have, by humiliating me on the most important night of my career. That's not—" He stopped, realizing he'd walked into a trap. "What do you want, Allison?" "A divorce, a fair division of assets, and for you and Hannah to disappear from my life." He studied me, suspicious of my apparent reasonableness. "Just like that? Just like that?" I forced a sad smile. "What's the alternative? Fighting to save a marriage that was built on lies?" Relief washed over his face. He thought I was surrendering, taking the path of least resistance. "I'll have my lawyer draw up an agreement. Something fair." "I'm sure your definition of fair and mine will differ significantly." As we finished our meals in tense silence, a woman approached our table. Layla, a fellow artist I knew peripherally from gallery events. "Allison, I thought that was you." She glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Sorry to interrupt your dinner." "It's fine," I said, grateful for the distraction. "Stephen, this is Layla. She's exhibiting at the Westmore Gallery next month." Stephen's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Lovely to meet you." "Actually, we've met before," Layla said. "At the benefit for the Children's Hospital last year. You were quite memorable." Something in her tone made me look closer. The way she was looking at Stephen, a mixture of disdain and knowing, suggested there was history there. "I should let you finish your dinner," she said, touching my shoulder. "Call me sometime, Allison. I've been meaning to talk to you about a potential collaboration." After she left, Stephen drained his wine glass. "Ready to go?" Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. Stephen tried to hail a cab for me, but I stepped back. I drove, I lied. I needed to be alone, to process. Allison, he called as I walked away. We're going to be okay, right? This can be civilized? I turned back, studying the man I'd once built my life around. Absolutely. I'm all about civility these days. Walking to the actual cab I'd booked around the corner, I texted Tyrese. Meeting done. He bought it. But there's something else. A woman named Layla. She knows something about Stephen that he doesn't want revealed. His response came quickly. Another piece of the puzzle. Time to find out what it is. I leaned back against the seat, the city lights blurring through the window. The plan was taking shape, but so was the realization that I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Someone calculating, someone willing to deceive. The question wasn't whether I could go through with it anymore, but whether I'd recognize myself when it was over. The gallery hummed with activity as staff prepared for the upcoming exhibitions. I stood in the center of my designated space, surrounded by blank walls that would soon showcase my work, or rather, the revised version of my work. Maria circled the room, making notes on her tablet. The truth is rarely pure and never simple, I murmured, recalling Oscar Wilde's words as I envisioned what would hang here in 3 weeks. What was that? Maria asked, looking up. Just thinking about truth and art and how they intersect. She approached, her expression concerned. You've been cryptic about these modifications to your exhibition. Care to elaborate? I hesitated. Maria was more than my curator. She was my mentor, one of the few people I trusted implicitly. But involving her in my plan meant risking her professional reputation alongside mine. I'm incorporating new elements, I said carefully. More autobiographical than originally intended. Maria's eyes narrowed. This is about Stephen and Hannah. It's about betrayal, deception, the lies we tell those closest to us. I gestured to the empty walls. Isn't that what Fractured Intimacies was always about? There's a difference between exploring universal themes and public revenge, Allison. Who said anything about revenge? Maria sighed. You didn't have to. It's written all over you, in the way you move, speak, even the clothes you're wearing. I glanced down at my outfit. Black jeans, fitted blazer, boots with a purposeful heel. Armor, not fabric. I'm not judging, she continued. God knows they deserve whatever's coming. But I care about you, and I've seen what vengeance does to people. It changes them. Maybe I need to change, I countered. Maybe the woman who let herself be deceived for months needs an upgrade. Or maybe she needs to heal. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Layla, agreeing to meet for coffee. I'd reached out after our encounter at the restaurant, curious about her history with Stephen. I have to go, I told Maria. Meeting someone who might have information. Maria caught my arm as I turned to leave. Just remember, whatever you put on these walls becomes part of your artistic legacy. Make sure it's something you can live with long after Stephen and Hannah are footnotes in your life. Her words followed me out of the gallery, unwelcome companions to my determination. The coffee shop was tucked away on a side street, the kind of place that attracted artists and writers seeking both caffeine and anonymity. Layla waved from a corner table, her vibrant scarf a splash of color in the muted space. I was surprised to hear from you, she said as I sat down, especially after that awkward dinner interruption. Nah, actually, that's why I wanted to talk. I wrapped my hands around my mug, anchoring myself. You seem to know Stephen, beyond a casual introduction. Layla's expression shifted, caution replacing warmth. We've met. There was something in the way you looked at him, like you knew something. She studied me for a long moment. Why are you asking, Allison? What's really going on? I hadn't planned to reveal much, but something in her directness compelled honesty. Stephen and my best friend Hannah have been having an affair. They were planning to leave together, after emptying my accounts. Layla didn't look surprised. And now you're what? Gathering ammunition? Information, I corrected. I'm trying to understand the full picture. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. The full picture is that your husband is a predator who targets women in vulnerable positions. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? 2 years ago, I was going through a divorce. Stephen was handling some legal work for the gallery where I was exhibiting. She twisted her ring, a nervous gesture. He was charming, attentive, made me feel seen during the worst period of my life. You had an affair, I stated, the words flat. I thought it was the beginning of something real. He talked about leaving his wife. You said you didn't understand him. She met my eyes directly. Then I discovered he was doing the same thing with another artist, and probably others. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. I came to one of your openings last year, but he intercepted me, threatened to ruin my career if I spoke to you. She shook her head. The art world is small, and he has connections. I couldn't risk it. I thought about the timeline I discovered, the meticulous planning. This is a pattern for him. It's more than a pattern. It's a strategy. He finds women at transition points in their lives and exploits their vulnerability. Layla leaned forward. Hannah isn't the first. She won't be the last. Unless someone stops him. Something in my tone made Layla study me more carefully. What are you planning, Allison? An exhibition, I said simply. About truth. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I have something you should see. Emails, messages. I kept everything. Why would you show me this now? Because I recognized that look in your eyes at the restaurant. I've worn it myself. She slid her phone across the table. Just be careful. Men like Stephen don't lose gracefully. Tyrese's apartment was empty when I returned, my mind reeling from what Layla had shared. I spread my sketches across his coffee table, adding new elements based on this fresh information. The exhibition was evolving into something more complex, more damning than I'd initially planned. My phone rang. Hannah. After 2 weeks of ignored calls, I answered. Allison, please don't hang up, she rushed. I know you met with Stephen. He said you're being reasonable about everything. Did he? I kept my voice neutral, remembering my role, the wounded but manageable ex. I never wanted to hurt you, her voice cracked. You have to believe that. What did you want, Hannah? My husband? My money? My life? It wasn't like that. We fell in love. While planning to steal from me, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. That's not love, that's conspiracy. Silence stretched between us. Stephen said you agreed to a civilized divorce. I did, but civilized doesn't mean I'll let you take what's mine. The exhibition, she said suddenly. You're still going forward with it? The question confirmed my suspicions. They were still planning something for opening night. Of course. Why wouldn't I? No reason. I just thought, with everything happening, you might postpone. Art doesn't wait for convenient timing, Hannah. I infused my voice with false vulnerability. Actually, the work has been therapeutic, helping me process everything. I heard the front door open, Tyrese returning. I have to go. Allison, wait. I ended the call as Tyrese entered, his expression grave. What's wrong? I asked. I did some digging into Stephen's recent activities, he said, setting his laptop on the table. He's accelerated the timeline. The Costa Rica property closes next week, not next month. They're moving up their plans, I realized. But why? There's more. He opened his computer, showing me a legal document. He's filed for an emergency hearing to unfreeze the accounts. Claims you're being vindictive and irrational. Cold fury washed over me. They're not waiting for the exhibition. They're going to try to clean me out before then. What do we do? I looked at my sketches, at the exhibition plans that suddenly seemed too slow, too measured for what we were facing. We move faster, I said, reaching for my phone. And we hit harder. The dim light of Tyrese's basement cast long shadows as I spread the evidence across the concrete floor. Printed emails, bank statements, photos, and testimonials from Layla and 2 other women Stephen had manipulated. All pieces of the puzzle I was assembling. In the corner, A projector displayed images on a makeshift screen, cycling through the visual components of what would become my exhibition. "This is getting intense," Tyrese said, handing me a coffee. "Are you sure about all this?" I gestured to the court documents we'd received that morning. "The hearing is in 3 days. If the judge rules in Stephen's favor, he'll drain every account before I can blink." "Your lawyer thinks—" "My lawyer thinks there's a 50-50 chance the judge sides with him." I rubbed my temples, fighting a headache. "Stephen is very convincing. You've seen how he operates." The projector flashed to an image of Stephen and Hannah at a restaurant, his hand possessively on her thigh. One of many surveillance photos Javier had helped us obtain. Legally, he insisted, since they were taken in public places. "Even if we stop him legally, they're still planning something for the exhibition." I pointed to the printout of text messages between them, discussing the opening night. "They want to humiliate me professionally. Make sure I'm too devastated to fight back while they disappear." Tyrese crouched beside me, studying the timeline I'd created. "So we beat them to the punch. Use the exhibition to expose them first." "Ain't exactly." I tapped a sketch of the gallery layout. "But we need to accelerate everything. The original plan was too slow." "What about Maria? Is she on board?" I hesitated. "She's concerned about the gallery's reputation, about turning an art exhibition into a public execution." "She has a point," Tyrese said carefully. "This goes beyond getting justice, Allison. This is about destroying them completely." "They were going to destroy me," I countered, my voice rising. "Take my money, my career, my dignity, everything. And now you're becoming just like them." The words hit like a physical blow. I stood, needing distance. "I'm nothing like them." "Aren't you? Surveillance, secret planning, calculated public humiliation." He gestured to the evidence surrounding us. "The methods are different, but the intent feels familiar." "So I should just let them win? Roll over and play the victim?" "There's a middle ground between victim and vigilante." I turned away, staring at the projected images. Was he right? Had my pursuit of justice morphed into something darker? The woman I saw in the mirror lately was harder, colder, someone who calculated rather than felt. My phone rang, breaking the tension. Maria. "Allison, where are you?" Her voice was tight with urgency. "At Tyrese's. Why?" "Stephen is here at the gallery, with a woman, not Hannah, someone from the Arts Commission." My stomach dropped. The Arts Commission controlled major funding for the gallery. "What do they want?" "He's suggesting your exhibition might be problematic, hinting that the commission should reconsider the gallery's grant if we proceed." Maria lowered her voice. "He knows, Allison. Someone tipped him off about your plans." The room seemed to tilt. "I'll be right there." I ended the call, turning to Tyrese. "Stephen's threatening the gallery's funding. He's trying to get my exhibition canceled." "How would he know what you're planning?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Who could have told him? The circle of people who knew the details was small. Tyrese, Maria, Javier, Layla. "I need to get to the gallery. Now." I arrived to find Maria alone in her office, face drawn with tension. "They just left," she said. "It was worse than I thought." "What happened?" "Stephen brought Diane Reeves from the Arts Commission. Casually mentioned concerns about your increasingly erratic behavior following your separation." Maria's expression hardened. "Suggested your exhibition might include defamatory content that could expose the gallery to legal liability." "He's trying to shut me down." And it might work." Diane was receptive to his concerns. "The gallery can't afford to lose commission funding, Allison." I paced the small office. "So we modify the exhibition, make it less explicit." "Or we postpone," Maria suggested. "Give yourself time to fight the legal battle first." "There isn't time. The hearing is in 3 days. If he unfreezes those accounts, then focus on that. Hire the best lawyer, gather your financial evidence." Maria grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. "This vendetta is consuming you. I barely recognize you anymore." The same observation Tyrese had made. Was I really changing that fundamentally? I can't let them win, I whispered. Winning what? At what cost? Maria released me, sighing. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation. I've defended you, but I'm not sure it's enough. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We should talk. I know what Stephen is planning. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Entrance, 7 p.m. Come alone. L. Layla? But why the secrecy, the new number? I need to go, I told Maria. But this isn't over. Stephen doesn't get to dictate my art or my future. The park was quiet at dusk, most visitors heading home for dinner. I scanned the north entrance, looking for Layla's distinctive scarf or silhouette. Instead, I saw a man sitting on a bench, his back to me. As I approached, he turned. Not Layla. Stephen. Hello, Allison. His smile was cold, triumphant. I thought it was time we had a real conversation. My body tensed, fight or flight instincts firing. Where's Layla? Layla, I have no idea. He patted the bench beside him. But I do know you've been quite busy. Gathering evidence, planning your little exhibition of horrors. How did you? You're not the only one with resources. He leaned forward. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd let you destroy everything I've built? Everything you've stolen, you mean? His expression hardened. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this crusade, cancel the exhibition, agree to my terms for the divorce. He held up his phone, showing me an email draft. Or I send this to every gallery owner and arts patron in the city. The email contained private details about my past, therapy sessions, medication for anxiety during college, a breakdown after my father's death, all framed to make me appear unstable and unreliable. How did you get this information? My voice shook despite my efforts to control it. Hannah had access to your personal email for years. You trusted her with everything, remember? His smile was almost pitying. So what's it going to be, Allison? Your revenge fantasy or your career? I stared at him. This man I'd once loved, now unrecognizable in his cruelty. In that moment, something inside me crystallized, not into the hardness I'd been cultivating, but into absolute clarity. You know what, Stephen? Send it. I stood, surprising both of us. Send all of it, because I'm done being afraid of you. His confidence faltered. You're bluffing. No, I'm choosing. And I choose truth. All of it, mine included. I started walking away, then turned back. See you at the hearing, and at the exhibition. It's going to be quite a show. The gallery lights felt too bright, too revealing as I stood in the center of my exhibition space. In 3 hours, these rooms would fill with critics, collectors, and curious art lovers. And Stephen and Hannah, who still believed they held all the cards. Final check, Maria said, tablet in hand. Are you absolutely certain about this? I surveyed the transformed space. What had begun as fractured intimacies was now the architecture of betrayal, a multimedia installation chronicling not just my personal story, but a pattern of predatory behavior spanning years. I'm certain, I said, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The hearing had gone in my favor, barely. Stephen's lawyer had painted me as emotionally unstable, but the financial evidence was irrefutable. The judge had maintained the freeze on our accounts, pending a full divorce settlement. Stephen had left the courtroom barely containing his rage, Hannah trailing behind him like a shadow. The press release went out an hour ago, Maria continued. We've already had calls from 3 major art publications. I nodded, moving toward the central installation. A series of transparent screens hung from the ceiling, each displaying fragments of text messages, emails, and photographs. Visitors would walk through them, experiencing the gradual revelation of deception from multiple perspectives. Beyond that, video testimonials from Layla and the other women played on a loop, their stories eerily similar. Is the security team briefed? I asked. 2 at each entrance, plus plainclothes throughout the gallery. Maria squeezed my shoulder. I still think you should have told Stephen exactly what was coming. The element of surprise feels cruel, I supplied. Dangerous. Cornered animals lash out. I turned to face her. I gave him a chance to walk away. He chose this. The week since our confrontation in the park had been a blur of preparation. Stephen had followed through on his threat, sending his email about my mental health history to several gallery contacts. But instead of hiding, I'd incorporated it into the exhibition, a wall dedicated to the weaponization of vulnerability, featuring his email alongside my therapy journals. I should get ready, I said, checking the time. The preview for Select Press starts in an hour. Maria nodded. I'll do a final walkthrough with security. Alone in the small office I'd been using, I changed into the outfit I'd chosen carefully. A structured black dress that felt like armor, red heels that added height and confidence. As I applied lipstick, my hand trembled slightly. A text from Therese. Just arrived. Everything looks powerful. You ready for this? I wasn't sure how to answer. The woman in the mirror looked ready, composed, determined. But beneath the surface, doubt churned. Was this justice or vengeance? Art or attack? The line had blurred weeks ago. Another text. This one from Layla. Standing with you tonight. We all are. That steadied me. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about breaking a pattern, exposing a predator who had hurt multiple women. Stephen's behavior with me wasn't an isolated incident. It was his modus operandi. I texted Tyrese back. Ready as I'll ever be. See you soon. The gallery hummed with voices and movement. The preview had gone well. Too well, perhaps. Word had spread quickly about the exhibition's controversial nature, drawing an even larger crowd than anticipated. I circulated through the rooms, watching reactions, answering questions from critics who alternated between admiration for my boldness and concern about the ethics of such public exposure. It's extraordinary, a collector told me, gesturing to the installation. Brutal, but necessary. I smiled, scanning the crowd for the faces I was waiting for. Stephen and Hannah hadn't arrived yet, but they would. The exhibition was too direct a challenge for them to ignore. Tyrese appeared at my side, handing me a glass of water. How are you holding up? Surprisingly calm, I admitted, like I'm watching someone else's life unfold. That's the adrenaline. The crash comes later. He nodded toward the entrance. Heads up, they're here. I turned to see Stephen and Hannah entering, his hand possessively at the small of her back. They paused just inside the doorway, taking in the title projected on the wall. The Architecture of Betrayal, a study in calculated deception. Stephen's expression shifted from curiosity to dawning comprehension as he registered the nature of the exhibition. Hannah paled, her eyes darting around the crowded space. Should we go over? Tyrese asked. No, I said. Let them come to me. I watched as they moved through the first installation, the transparent screens displaying their own words, their own plans. Stephen's pace quickened, his body language increasingly tense as he realized the extent of what I'd created. Hannah stopped completely at one point, staring at a screen showing her text messages to him about me. She suspects nothing, too wrapped up in her art to notice what's happening right under her nose. When they reached the video testimonials, Stephen grabbed Hannah's arm, clearly intending to leave. But it was too late. They'd been recognized. A critic I'd spoken with earlier approached them, recorder in hand. Mr. Webb, your wife's exhibition is quite revealing. Care to comment on the allegations made by these women? Stephen's face contorted with fury as he searched the room, finding me across the crowd. Our eyes locked. In that moment, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, only a strange, hollow relief. The truth was out. Whatever happened next, the lies were exposed. He started toward me, pushing through the crowd. Hannah remained frozen by the videos, tears streaming down her face as she watched Layla describe how Stephen had targeted her during her divorce. You had no right, Stephen hissed when he reached me, voice low but vibrating with rage. This is defamation. I'll sue you, the gallery, everyone involved. Everything here is documented, I replied calmly. Every text, every email, every bank transfer. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Stephen. You've destroyed my reputation. You did that yourself. I just created the exhibition. His eyes narrowed. This won't bring you peace, Allison. You've become exactly what you claim to hate. Manipulative, calculating, cruel. The words hit their mark, echoing my own doubts. Had I become like him in my pursuit of justice? Before I could respond, a flash of movement caught my attention. Hannah, rushing toward us, her composed facade completely shattered. "How could you do this?" she demanded, voice breaking. "We were friends, best friends." "That's exactly why I had to do it," I said, suddenly tired. "Because friendship should mean something. Because trust matters." Around us, the crowd had grown silent, watching the drama unfold, the very public reckoning I'd orchestrated. "You've ruined everything," Hannah whispered. "No," I corrected her gently. "I just revealed it." Stephen grabbed her arm. "We're leaving. This pathetic spectacle isn't worth our time." As they turned to go, Maria stepped forward, blocking their path. "Actually, there are some people who'd like to speak with you, Mr. Webb." She gestured to two men in suits standing by the entrance. "Detectives investigating financial fraud. Something about wire transfers to Costa Rica?" Stephen's face drained of color. The final piece of my exhibition, the one I hadn't displayed publicly. Financial records I'd provided to authorities, showing not just his attempt to steal from me, but similar patterns with other women, including Layla. As the detectives approached, the reality of what I'd done hit me fully. This wasn't just art. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. Messy, imperfect, but real. I watched as Stephen was led away. Hannah left, standing alone in the center of my creation. In her face, I saw the same devastation I'd felt that rainy night when my world collapsed. The symmetry should have felt satisfying. Instead, I turned away, toward the future I would now create on my own terms. Morning light filtered through the gallery windows, illuminating the empty space where my exhibition had stood. 3 days had passed since the opening night, since Stephen had been led away by detectives, since Hannah had crumbled before my eyes. The installation had been scheduled to run for a month, but I'd made the decision to dismantle it early. "You're sure about this?" Maria asked, watching as I carefully removed the last of the transparent screens. "I've said what I needed to say," I replied, wrapping the delicate material in protective cloth. "Keeping it up feels like picking at a wound." The exhibition had become the talk of the art world overnight. Critics called it revolutionary, a searing indictment of betrayal, and uncomfortably voyeuristic. Attendance had broken gallery records. Collectors had offered obscene amounts for pieces of the installation. I'd turned them all down. "The art served its purpose," I explained to Maria as we boxed up the video equipment. "It was never meant to be permanent." "What will you do with it all?" I considered the question. "Archive most of it. Donate the proceeds from any sales to organizations supporting victims of financial abuse." Maria nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. I needed to move on. The exhibition had been cathartic, necessary, but it wasn't the entirety of who I was or wanted to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Therese. "Coffee later?" "Have news about S." Stephen had been released on bail the day after the exhibition opened, facing charges of wire fraud and financial exploitation. His lawyer had immediately filed a countersuit against me for invasion of privacy and defamation. The legal battle ahead would be messy, prolonged. Strangely, I felt prepared for it. Not eager, not vengeful, just ready. "You have that look," Maria observed, interrupting my thoughts. "What look?" "The one you get when you're planning your next move." She smiled slightly. "It's good to see it again. For a while there, you were all reaction, no creation." Her words struck me. She was right. For weeks, I'd been responding to Stephen and Hannah's betrayal, defining myself in opposition to their actions, rather than by my own vision. "I'm thinking about a new series," I admitted. "Something about reconstruction. The architecture of rebuilding after destruction." "I'd like to see that," Maria said. "When you're ready." As we finished packing, the gallery door opened. Hannah stood in the entrance, looking smaller than I remembered, her usual polished appearance dulled by exhaustion. Maria glanced between us. "I'll give you two a minute." When we were alone, Hannah approached cautiously, as if expecting me to lash out. "I heard you were taking down the exhibition." News travels fast. The art world runs on gossip. A ghost of her old smile flickered across her face. No one's talking about anything else. I continued wrapping a piece of equipment, not making it easy for her. "Why are you here, Hannah?" She took a deep breath. "To tell you Stephen lied about everything. Not just to you, to me too." She twisted her hands together. "He never intended to take me to Costa Rica. He'd already started seeing someone else. The property was in his name only." I paused, absorbing this. "So you were just another mark. Like all the others." Her voice cracked. "I deserved the public humiliation, but I needed you to know I've given a statement to the detectives. About the financial fraud, about everything." I studied her. This woman I'd once trusted with every secret, every insecurity. The betrayal still ached, but the white-hot rage had cooled into something more complex. "Why tell me this?" "Because you deserved better," she said simply. "From both of us. And because I thought, maybe someday." "We won't be friends again," I said, the words coming out gentler than I'd intended. "Some things can't be rebuilt." She nodded, eyes bright with tears. "I know. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And that your art was brilliant, even when it was destroying me." After she left, I sat alone in the empty gallery space, surrounded by the boxed remains of my exhibition. My phone buzzed again. Tyrese, checking if I was still meeting him. I texted back. "On my way." Outside, the spring air felt cleansing. I walked the 6 blocks to the coffee shop, using the time to process Hannah's revelation. Stephen had betrayed us both. Differently, but completely. The knowledge didn't erase what she'd done, but it shifted something inside me, loosening a knot I hadn't realized was still tight. Therese was waiting at an outdoor table, 2 coffees already in place. "You okay? You look intense." "Hannah came to see me," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Apparently Stephen was playing us both. Are you surprised?" "No," I admitted. "Just, I don't know, processing." "Well, this might help with the processing." He slid a folder across the table. "Javier found something interesting in Stephen's cloud storage. Turns out our boy has been running the same con for years. Different women, same pattern." I opened the folder to find financial records, emails, photos, evidence of at least 3 other relationships before Hannah, all following the same trajectory. "He's looking at serious prison time," Tyrese continued. "The DA is building a case for a pattern of financial exploitation." I closed the folder, suddenly weary of evidence and revelations. I don't want to be part of this anymore. "Part of what?" "The Stephen and Hannah show. The betrayed wife narrative." I pushed the folder back toward him. "I'm ready for a different story." Tyrese studied me for a moment. "What kind of story?" "I'm not sure yet, but I want to create it, not just react to what's been done to me." I took a sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest. The exhibition was necessary. It was even healing in its way, but it was also a response to pain. And now I want to make art that comes from somewhere else, something that builds rather than exposes. Tyrese smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes I'd come to value over these difficult weeks. "I'd like to see that." "You will," I promised. "I'm thinking about a collaborative project, actually. Something about unexpected connections." His eyebrows raised slightly. "Is that an invitation?" "It might be." I returned his smile, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in months. "I'm still figuring out the details." As we talked, sketching ideas on coffee shop napkins, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal that rainy night felt like a different person, not because the pain had disappeared, but because it no longer defined me. Stephen and Hannah had tried to reduce me to a victim, a footnote in their story. My exhibition had reclaimed the narrative, forced them to become characters in mine. But neither version was complete. I was neither the trusting wife who had been deceived, nor the avenging artist who had exposed them. I was something more complex, more interesting, a woman in the process of creating herself. The napkin between us filled with sketches and notes, possibilities taking shape. Whatever came next, the legal battles, the professional fallout, the personal rebuilding, I would face it on my terms, with my vision leading the way. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Therese as we gathered our things to leave. Living well? He suggested with a smirk. No, I said, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. Creating something new that could never have existed without the breaking. Hi there, I'm Marceline. My sister once whispered to me on Thanksgiving, "You're not welcome." And I said, "Fine, but don't expect the $2,000 I've been sending you." But that wasn't the real betrayal. The real betrayal was years of quiet takedowns. When family doesn't just shut you out of a holiday, but out of your own life. They drained me, used my name, ruined my credit, and still called me selfish. And you know what hurts most? It wasn't the money. It was realizing they never saw me as family at all. How far would your own family go before you finally said enough? The drive from downtown Portland to my mother's place in the suburbs should have taken me an hour, maybe an hour and a half at most. But today, Thanksgiving traffic turned that into 3 brutal hours of bumper-to-bumper frustration. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, the kind that wasn't heavy, but enough to blur your windshield and settle in your bones. By the time I pulled into the narrow driveway of my childhood home, my shoulders were stiff, and my hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 5:32 p.m. The sky had already gone dim, the clouds hanging low like a lid over the entire city. On the passenger seat beside me sat the pumpkin pie I'd baked the night before, the one my mom used to ask for every Thanksgiving, the one she used to tell me I made better than anyone. I also brought a bottle of Chardonnay and wore the olive green coat she once complimented, the only one she ever said made me look put together. I guess, deep down, I still believed this would be the year things would be different. But when the door finally opened, I knew instantly it wouldn't. Celestia stood there, her face flat, no warmth in her eyes, not even the fake kind she used to summon for the holidays. Behind her, the faint hum of laughter and clinking plates echoed from the dining room. And then Vera appeared. My younger sister, always the favorite, always the one who knew how to tilt the room her way. She leaned in behind my mother and said it, quiet, clipped, like a blade slicing the air. "You're not welcome this Thanksgiving." At first I thought I misheard. The words floated awkwardly between us, carried by the cold November air. I swallowed, shifting the pie awkwardly in my arms. "You're kidding, right?" Celestia's lips barely moved. "It's better if you don't come in." Vera crossed her arms, her smirk polite but sharp. "We just want to keep it light this year. No drama." That word, drama, they loved using it. As if standing outside in the cold after 3 hours of driving was the drama, not shutting out their own family. I took a breath, tried to keep my voice even. I drove 3 hours. I brought pie. Vera shrugged, leaning her shoulder against the doorframe like she had all the time in the world. "No one asked you to." The words punched harder than they should have. And maybe that's why I let the next one fly, sharp and cutting. "Fine, but don't expect $2,000 from me next month." Celestia blinked like she hadn't understood. I didn't wait to explain. I turned on my heel, walked back down the porch steps, and heard the door click shut behind me without a single goodbye. By the time I reached my car, the weight in my chest pressed heavier than the pie tin in my hands. The engine hummed quietly as I pulled away from the curb, the street lamps flickering on, one by one. The radio played some old 80s song I barely registered, while my mind spiraled back through years of holidays like this. Me showing up, then pretending I wasn't enough, until they needed something again. I hit the first red light at the end of their street when my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. I let it ring until the last second, then picked up. Marceline, my father's voice filled the car. Dorian, the man who left when I was 16, but always managed to chime in when it suited him. Your mom told me what happened. You need to stop being so difficult. I laughed under my breath, a hollow, tired sound. She told you she shut the door in my face? She's upset, he continued, like I hadn't said a word. You're the older sister. It's your responsibility to keep this family together. That sentence snapped something clean in half inside me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Responsibility doesn't mean being the family's personal ATM dad. You're overreacting, he said flatly. Family is family. I didn't answer. I just pressed the red button, ending the call mid-sentence. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than the trip out. Traffic had thinned, but the weight inside me hadn't. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex downtown, the sky had turned to ink, and the rain had softened to a mist. The parking lot was nearly empty. No one waiting. No one asking me for anything. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the soft glow of the streetlights on wet pavement. Then I whispered to myself, quietly, but with the kind of certainty that settles deep in your bones. Maybe it's time I stop saving people who wouldn't save me. The apartment felt heavier than usual that night, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I hadn't bothered to unpack the pie or the bottle of wine. They were still sitting on my kitchen counter, untouched, like two silent witnesses to the wreckage of the evening. Sleep didn't come easily. When I finally drifted off, it wasn't restful. More like slipping under cold water and waking up gasping every hour. The next 2 days passed in a haze. I worked from home, answering emails, staring at spreadsheets, pretending everything was fine. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. By Saturday night, the buzzing became constant. The group chat with my mom, Vera, and a handful of cousins had lit up like Times Square. I tried to ignore it, but the notifications kept coming, one after another, relentless. I finally opened the thread. Celestia, I can't believe you would abandon your own mother on Thanksgiving, after everything I've done for you. Celestia, you're not the daughter I raised. Vera chimed in as expected. Some people only care about money. Guess that's what happens when you have no real family. The comments cut deeper than they should have, even though I knew exactly how the game worked. This wasn't new. This was their favorite dance. Make me the villain, paint themselves as the victims. Scrolling through the chat, I noticed Celestia had taken her performance public. On her Facebook page, she'd posted a photo from Thanksgiving dinner, everyone smiling, glasses raised, the caption reading, "Grateful for family who truly loves you. Some people forget who gave them everything." The comments underneath made my stomach turn. Aunt Diane, that's right, sis. Some people need to remember where they came from. Uncle Robert, Marceline always thought she was better than us. Money doesn't buy love. Vera, of course, had left her signature stamp. We don't need that kind of energy around here. It wasn't just family. Mutual friends, old neighbors, even people I barely spoke to had clicked like or chimed in with their 2 cents. The worst part? I could feel the narrative shifting, and I wasn't even in the room to defend myself. I set my phone down, trying to breathe past the knot in my chest. It felt like I was watching myself drown from a distance. Sunday morning, I told myself I wouldn't check. I'd focus on work, laundry, meal prepping for the week. Anything but my phone. But habit is a cruel thing. Around noon, while brewing coffee, I glanced at my notifications and froze. An email from HR. Subject line, quick check-in, Monday. I opened it, my pulse thudding in my ears. Hi, Marceline. Can we touch base briefly tomorrow morning? Nothing urgent, just something that came up I'd like to chat about. Thanks, Cynthia. A wave of unease washed over me. I hadn't done anything wrong. My projects were on track. There was no reason for HR to suddenly want to chat. Monday morning came faster than I wanted. Portland's sky was its usual shade of winter gray, clouds hanging low and heavy as I walked into the office. Cynthia greeted me with her usual polite smile, motioning me to sit. She folded her hands, voice casual but measured. This might sound odd, but your mom reached out to me on LinkedIn over the weekend. I blinked. Excuse me? She messaged me, Cynthia continued, choosing her words carefully. Said you'd been distant lately, that she was worried about you, mentioned something about you refusing to help her. I swallowed hard, my heart sliding somewhere near my knees. She contacted my HR manager? My voice barely came out. Cynthia gave me a small, sympathetic smile. Look, I didn't want to bring it up, but it's a bit unorthodox. That was putting it mildly. I left that meeting feeling like I'd been cracked open, not because of what Cynthia had said, but because I knew exactly how far my mother was willing to go. By the time I got home that evening, the weight I'd carried since Thanksgiving had mutated into something sharper, heavier. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through the unread messages still flooding in. You broke your mother's heart. You're selfish. All you care about is money. Each word felt like a stone piled on my chest. And yet, somewhere under all that noise, a new thought had begun to take root. If they kept crossing lines, maybe I needed to draw one they couldn't step over. The apartment had fallen into an uneasy silence, not peaceful, tense, like the pause before a storm. It had been a week since Thanksgiving, and while the group chat had gone quiet, I knew better than to trust the calm. It wasn't over. It never was. The messages from my mother and Vera hadn't stopped. They'd just changed. No more crying voicemails or Facebook rants. Now it was guilt-laced silence, broken by the occasional hope you're happy text or a passive-aggressive quote shared online. But the noise never stopped in my head. Every night, I replayed Thanksgiving like a movie I couldn't turn off. The slammed door, my mother's glare, Vera's smug smile, and Dad's voice, reminding me, again, that I was the one holding the family together. By December, I thought maybe they'd finally moved on. Maybe I could breathe. I should have known better. It started small. Monday morning at the office, I ran into Julia from finance. We weren't close, but friendly enough. She smiled over her coffee. Hey, Marceline, I heard you're paying for your niece's tuition. That's really generous. I almost dropped my mug. I blinked. Sorry, what? She shrugged casually. Vera mentioned it on Facebook last week. Said she's lucky to have a sister like you. My stomach dropped. I never said that. Julia looked surprised. Oh, sorry. I just assumed. I forced a smile and walked away, but my pulse was pounding by the time I sat back at my desk. The heaviness I'd been trying to shake since Thanksgiving came rushing back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. Why Vera would post something like that. Around midnight, I opened my laptop, running on nothing but gut instinct. 5 minutes later, everything cracked open. There it was, right in front of me. An active payday loan in my name. Opened 3 weeks ago. $3,500 borrowed. Over $4,200 owed now, thanks to penalties. The email and phone number on the application weren't mine, but I recognized them. Vera's. I stared at the screen, the weight of it pressing down like a boulder. She'd taken out a loan under my name days before Thanksgiving. While I'd been budgeting for holiday gifts, she'd been wrecking my credit. It wasn't just the money, it was the violation, the betrayal. And when I looked deeper, it got worse. The electric bills I'd been covering when Dad lost his job, the groceries I'd paid for while Mom's check was late, the car lease I'd co-signed because Vera couldn't qualify. It wasn't a handful of favors. It was a pattern I hadn't wanted to see. By 2 a.m., my entire chest felt hollow. It had never been about family. It had always been about how much they could take. I sat in the dark, my laptop casting a cold glow across the room, listening to the rain tapping at the window. Then I picked up my phone, scrolled past the unread messages and guilt trips, and opened a blank text field. Quietly, I said it out loud, like a vow. They've crossed every line. It's time I draw mine. The city streets sparkled that night, strings of white lights wrapping around bare trees, storefront windows dressed in garlands and ribbons, Christmas music humming faintly from every corner cafe. Portland always looked like a postcard around the holidays, charming, magical even. But all it did was remind me how empty everything felt this year. 2 weeks had passed since I uncovered the payday loan in my name, and the space between me and my family felt colder than the December air. I tried to fill the silence with work, errands, cooking meals I barely touched. But nothing muted the hollow ache in my chest, the gnawing sense that they hadn't finished with me yet. That certainty arrived one Saturday morning over coffee. I was scrolling half-heartedly through social media, trying to avoid another day of staring at my financial statements, when a photo stopped me cold. A family Christmas brunch, taken at my mother's house. My mother smiling in the middle, Vera standing beside her, aunts, uncles, cousins all packed around the table, holding up glasses of champagne. The caption read, "Grateful for my real family today. Some people forget who gave them everything." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into knots. The comments under the post were worse. Aunt Diane, "Some people forget where they came from." Uncle Robert, "It's sad when your own blood turns their back on you." Vera, of course, had left her little gem. "Some folks only show up when there's a paycheck involved." The weight of it hit harder than I expected. Not just the exclusion, but the public disownment. It wasn't enough to shut me out quietly. No, they had to parade it around like a trophy. I set my phone down, but it felt like the words had burned themselves into my skin. That night, as the holiday lights blinked outside my apartment window, the next blow landed. A text alert from my bank. "Suspicious activity detected on your credit profile. Application for new credit card declined." My heart sank. I opened the message and pulled up the details. Someone had attempted to open a credit card in my name. The application was flagged and rejected because of discrepancies, but the email and phone number linked to the attempt made my stomach drop. Vera's again. I stared at the screen for a long time, numb and exhausted. They weren't done, not even close. I could have screamed, cried, thrown my phone across the room. But instead, I did what I'd always done. I sat there in the stillness, trying to figure out how to carry it, how to fix it. And then I realized I wasn't going to fix it, not this time. Later that night, when the city outside had gone quiet, and the only sound was the low hum of my heater, I picked up my phone one last time. My fingers hovered over the message field, then moved quickly, deliberately. To Celestia, Vera. "If either of you cross one more line, I will burn this bridge myself, permanently." I hit send without reading it twice. For a moment I sat motionless, heart pounding in my throat. Then I whispered into the dark, "Next time they try me, there won't be a warning." The first Monday of January arrived colder than I expected. The sky outside my office window blanketed in slate gray. Portland winters had a way of bleeding into everything. The streets, the people, even the light felt heavy. I should have known the new year wouldn't come quietly. I was halfway through my morning emails when the HR notification popped up in the corner of my screen. "Cynthia Harper, can you stop by my office at 10 a.m.? My stomach sank. There was nothing unusual in the wording, but after everything, I'd learned to recognize when the ground shifted beneath me. At exactly 10, I knocked on Cynthia's door, forcing my face into something resembling calm. She looked up, her smile tight, eyes apologetic. "Marceline, thanks for coming. Have a seat." I sat, smoothing my skirt over my knees. She took a breath before speaking. "I wanted to give you a heads up. We've received a couple of anonymous concerns." I didn't flinch, but inside my chest tightened like a vice. "Concerns about what?" I asked, voice neutral. She tapped her pen against a folder. "There's been chatter. Comments about your family situation, suggesting it's affecting your work environment. Some rather personal things." I nodded slowly, already knowing exactly where this was headed. Cynthia hesitated before continuing. "I'm obligated to remind you to keep personal matters separate from professional responsibilities. You're a valuable part of this team, but they said I'm unstable." I finished for her, my voice flat. She didn't deny it, just sighed. "I know it's unfair, but perception matters." I thanked her, stood up, and left without another word. By the time I reached my desk, my pulse was pounding in my ears. I didn't need to ask who'd fed those rumors. I could hear Vera's voice clear as day. "She's so cold lately. You know how she gets. Can't even keep her job together because of us." It wasn't enough for them to drain me financially. Now, they wanted to tear down everything I'd built. That evening, as the rain returned, soft at first, then relentless, I tried to shake off the conversation. I cooked a simple dinner, cleaned up the apartment, folded laundry. But nothing worked. The tension settled in my bones like winter itself. I had just finished putting away dishes when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against my door. I froze. A glance through the peephole made my stomach twist. Celestia, Vera, and behind them, 2 of our cousins. People who hadn't spoken to me in months, now standing on my doorstep like an intervention squad. I unlocked the door but didn't open it fully. "What do you want?" Vera's face was set, arms crossed. "We need to talk." Celestia's voice softened in that way she always used when she wanted something. "Sweetheart, we can't keep going like this." I stepped back, allowing them inside only because I knew they wouldn't leave otherwise. They filed in like a storm. "You're tearing this family apart," one cousin said immediately, not even sitting down. Vera's eyes flashed. "You think you're better than us because you make more money?" Celestia reached for my arm. "I'm your mother, Marceline. You can't abandon us." The words sliced sharper than I expected. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I gave you a warning," Vera scoffed. "Oh, please. You think cutting us off makes you powerful? You've always been selfish." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked calmly to the door, opened it wide, and said, "I've carried all of you long enough. This is where I stop." Celestia's eyes widened. "Marceline," but I shook my head, voice firm. "No, you've crossed every line, and I'm done pretending I don't see it." Before they could respond, I stepped aside and gestured toward the hallway. "Leave." They hesitated, exchanging looks, but something in my face must have told them I meant it. One by one they filed out, Celestia's face crumpling, Vera glaring like she wanted to spit fire. I closed the door behind them, the click of the lock louder than thunder. For a long moment I leaned back against it, breathing hard. Then I whispered to myself, "Next time, I won't just close the door, I'll lock it." The days following that confrontation passed like fog rolling through my apartment, thick, heavy, and impossible to shake. I hadn't heard a single knock on my door since the night I sent them away. But the silence wasn't peace. It was the quiet before another storm. By mid-January, the texts started again. This time, they weren't asking for help. They were louder, uglier. "Vera, you're heartless. What kind of sister throws her family away?" Celestia, "I raised you better than this. You've become cold, bitter, selfish." And then, the family group chat exploded. Comments flying from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. After all she's done for herself, she forgot who helped her get there. "Must be nice to have money and no soul." I didn't bother replying. Instead, I pressed down on the group thread until the delete chat option popped up and tapped it without hesitation. But the damage bled beyond my phone. At work, I noticed subtle shifts. Conversations paused when I walked by. Coworkers who used to greet me with smiles now offered polite nods and lowered eyes. Even Cynthia had pulled me aside earlier that week, voice cautious. "Hey, Marceline, I don't want to pry, but I heard something about family troubles. If there's anything I can do." I'd smiled politely and told her I was fine, but the weight in my chest told me otherwise. It wasn't just family anymore. It was my reputation. That night, after another long day of side eyes and whispers I didn't want to hear, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I was done waiting for the next attack. I pulled up my online banking account and one by one began severing every cord they had wrapped around me. The utility payments in Celestia's name? Cancelled. The automatic transfers to cover their groceries and rent? Stopped. The credit card where Vera's name sat neatly as an authorized user? Removed. The family Netflix account, the Amazon Prime subscription, Spotify family plan, all disabled within minutes. Each click felt like slicing away another chain around my throat. When I was done, I opened a new email and addressed it to both of them. Subject: effective immediately. You have 2 weeks to handle your own finances. I will no longer fund people who disrespect me. My support was never an obligation. Consider it officially ended. I hovered over the send button for a moment, breathing deeply, then clicked. There was no satisfaction in it, not really, just space. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Later that night, I sat by the window, watching the Portland rain paint streaks across the glass. The apartment around me was quiet. No notifications buzzing, no demands waiting. I knew what would come next. The tantrums, the insults, the guilt. But it didn't matter anymore. They'd wanted me to disappear. So I had. I whispered into the darkness, voice steady. They wanted me gone. Let's see how they survive without me. The first few days after I cut them off were unnervingly quiet. No more midnight texts, no missed calls, no Facebook posts aimed at me like sharpened knives. I knew it wasn't real peace. It was the pause before the explosion. It arrived in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I was wrapping up a report when an email from my bank appeared in my inbox. Subject: Urgent Debt Collection Notice. My stomach dropped. I clicked. The letter was simple, sterile, devastating. This is a formal notice regarding unpaid debts totaling $3,500 linked to your name. Failure to respond within 10 business days will result in further legal action. My pulse roared in my ears as I read further. The account details matched the payday loan Vera had opened without my knowledge. They hadn't paid a cent since I cut them off. And now the debt collectors had come knocking, at my door. Before I could react, my phone vibrated. A new message in the family group chat I thought I'd left. Vera, if you think you can humiliate us and walk away, you're wrong. Celestia, you're trying to destroy this family. We'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. Another message popped up. Marceline's trying to ruin us because she's bitter and alone. They had regrouped, and now they were fighting dirty. That night, the real assault began. I received emails from acquaintances, church friends, old neighbors, even colleagues, all hinting that my family had reached out. I heard some troubling things about you and your mom. Are you okay? Your sister's been saying you've gone cold. You can't forget where you come from, Marceline. They weren't subtle. The smear campaign had begun. By Thursday, a coworker pulled me aside, voice low. Hey, I don't want to get involved, but your sister's been posting things about you, saying you abandoned your mom when she needed you most. I felt the ground shift beneath me, not out of surprise, but out of pure exhaustion. They wanted to corner me, humiliate me, drag my name through every room I'd worked so hard to build. But I was done reacting. I was ready to act. That night, I gathered every piece of paper, every financial statement, every screenshot of their lies and manipulations. I compiled the payday loan documents, the credit card fraud alerts, the texts, the emails. I printed everything and placed it in a neat file folder. Then, as the rain battered my apartment windows, I sat down and wrote 2 letters. The first to my family. Effective immediately, I am filing a formal police report regarding the fraudulent use of my financial information. Any further contact will be documented and treated as harassment. You have crossed the final line. The second, to the police. It wasn't easy. Filing a report against your own mother, your sister, it felt like driving a knife into your own ribs. But it had to be done. Later that night, as I slid the finished documents into my bag, there was a knock at the door. I didn't have to look to know who it was. I opened it to find Vera, Celestia, and 2 cousins standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, faces twisted in rage. Vera pushed forward first. You think this makes you the good guy? Celestia's voice trembled. I gave you everything, and now you're throwing us to the wolves. I didn't flinch. You're the ones who lit the fire, I said quietly. I'm just refusing to burn with you. Vera stepped closer, eyes blazing. If you think you can erase us, you're delusional. I met her glare head on. I'm not erasing you. I'm freeing myself. I stepped back inside, fingers curling around the door. And next time you try to wreck my life, it won't just be police paperwork you'll face. I shut the door, locking it without hesitation. For a long time, I stood there, listening to the muffled shouts outside. Eventually, they faded into the night. I leaned back against the door, breathing deeply. They wanted me gone, I whispered to myself. Let's see how they survive without me. 1 week after the confrontation at my door, I sat in a small, sterile room at the Portland Police Department, my fingers tracing the edge of a manila folder on the table. The officer across from me glanced down at the paperwork I had brought, copies of the fraudulent loan, credit card attempts, threatening texts, screenshots of public defamation posts. "You understand this is serious," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. "Your sister could face criminal charges for identity theft and financial fraud." I nodded once. I understand. Filing a police report against family wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do. But here I was, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to survive. When I left the station, it wasn't raining, but the clouds pressed low and heavy, the kind of gray that felt like it could swallow you whole. Back at my apartment, I barely had time to hang up my coat before the backlash began. First, a long email from Celestia. "How could you do this to your own blood? Do you know what you've done? Your sister might lose custody of May. You've destroyed this family." Then a call from Dorian, sharp and bitter. "You went too far, Marceline. Blood is blood. You don't take family to court." And finally, the inevitable message from Vera. "You're heartless. I'll see you in court too. Don't think you can walk away without consequences." Each message felt like a knife in my back. But this time, I didn't bleed. Instead, I opened my laptop and watched as the community began to shift. News traveled fast in our circle. At first, the gossip painted me as the villain, but the truth has a way of crawling to the surface. I started receiving messages from acquaintances. "I didn't realize what they'd done to you. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have said something sooner. You're brave for standing up to them." And then one night, a message from Narina, my cousin's wife, lit up my screen. "You did what none of us ever dared. You stood up for yourself. I hope you know you're not alone." I stared at her words for a long time. That was the thing. I had felt alone for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But that night, I finally allowed myself to feel something other than anger. It wasn't relief yet, not quite, but it was something close. The next morning, I wrote one last message in the family group chat. I didn't soften it. I didn't sugarcoat it. "I loved you. I sacrificed everything for you, and you called it obligation. I am done paying for a family that never saw me." Then, without hesitation, I blocked them both. My mother, my sister. It felt like slamming a door, like turning off a faucet that had been leaking for years. That evening, I sat by my window as the rain tapped gently against the glass. For the first time in what felt like forever, my phone was silent. No guilt-laden texts, no veiled threats, just me. I leaned back, breathing deep into the quiet. "Maybe now," I whispered to no one but myself, "I can finally breathe." By late February, the rain had finally eased. The cold lingered, but for the first time in months, the sky over Portland was clear. I moved into a new apartment that week, smaller, quieter, and entirely mine. No more spare keys left under flower pots, just in case. No more utility bills with someone else's name on them. No more weight pressing on my chest every time my phone buzzed. The process of filing charges against Vera had moved quickly once the evidence was handed over. 2 weeks after I filed, I received an email from the detective handling the case. "Your sister has been formally charged with identity theft and financial fraud. If she fails to appear in court, there will be a warrant for her arrest." It wasn't a victory. It felt more like surgery. Necessary, painful, leaving scars. I heard through distant relatives that Celestia's world had collapsed. Friends stopped showing up at her brunches. Neighbors stopped inviting her to holiday parties. Whatever carefully constructed version of reality she'd built around herself had shattered. Vera lost her job. The retail store she worked at couldn't keep her on after the fraud charges. There were whispers about a custody battle starting. May's father suddenly petitioning for full custody once the charges went public. Dorian tried one last time. A voicemail that appeared on my phone one rainy Thursday night. "You've torn this family apart. Whatever happens next, that's on you." I didn't call back. A week later, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Celestia. Inside was a letter. Short, shaky, written in blue ink. "You'll always be our daughter, even if you've forgotten what that means." I folded the paper quietly, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash. Some wounds never stopped bleeding because the person holding the knife refused to let go. But I had. The weeks that followed felt strange, like learning to walk again after carrying too much weight for too long. I signed up for a cooking class every Saturday morning. I met up with friends I hadn't seen in years, started therapy, took long walks without checking my phone every few minutes. The world was quieter. One evening, as I unpacked the last box in my new apartment, a message lit up my phone. Narina, I just wanted you to know, you taught me something. You taught me that love without boundaries isn't love, it's survival. I stared at her words for a long time before typing back. Thank you, I'm finally learning that too. That night, I sat by the window as the last light of day faded behind the city skyline. The air smelled like wet pavement and new beginnings. They had wanted me to bleed so they could live, but I had finally stopped the bleeding. The scars would remain, sure, but so would my freedom. And for the first time in my life, the quiet wasn't something to fear. It was mine. And before I leave you tonight, let me tell you this, not as the woman in the story, but as someone who's lived it. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that family is not defined by who shares your blood. It's defined by who respects your boundaries, who lifts you up without asking you to shrink yourself. We're raised to believe that love means sacrifice, that being the good daughter, the good sibling, means carrying everyone else's burdens until we collapse. But that's not love. That's survival at the expense of your soul. You are allowed to choose peace over obligation. You are allowed to say, enough. And you are still worthy of love, even when you stop bleeding for people who would never bandage your wounds. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you had to carry more than your share just to keep the peace? Or maybe you've had to walk away from people you loved to finally start living your own life. If this story touched something inside you, leave me a comment below. Type 1. If you've ever chosen yourself after years of choosing others, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like this story, that's okay too. Tell me why. Tell me what you'd do differently. Let's talk about it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, human, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join this little corner of the internet where we talk about the things no one else dares to. Hi there. I'm Celine. My mom kicked me out of her wedding, her big day, said I wasn't good enough to be part of it. But that wasn't the worst part. Behind the flowers, the fancy dresses, the picture-perfect smiles, they were hiding something bigger. They'd spent years erasing me, not just from the guest list, but from the family, from the future. And when I finally walked away, everything they'd built came crashing down. But here's the thing. When your own mother turns you into the villain of her fairy tale, what choice do you have? You think the wedding was the real drama? Wait until you hear what happened after. It was almost closing time at my flower shop in Charleston when my phone buzzed on the counter. The soft hum of the AC blended with the faint scent of lilies and damp eucalyptus hanging in the air. I was trimming the last bouquet of the day, the kind of peaceful moment I usually enjoyed, until that text shattered everything. Celine, I think it's better if you don't attend the wedding. It's for the best. For a second, I thought I'd misread it. My fingers froze over the stems, my thumb still pressing the shears mid-snap. I blinked, rereading those cold, calculated words, from my own mother. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real. She didn't want me there, on her wedding day. I stared at the screen as if I could will the words to change, but they didn't. They sat there, flat and final, like a verdict handed down in a courtroom I didn't even know I was being tried in. It wasn't the first time my mother, Drusilla, had decided I wasn't good enough. But this was different. This was the final nail. My chest tightened, a slow, dull ache spreading beneath my ribs. I glanced around my tiny shop, where every corner held memories of me holding this family together. And now, they had decided to move forward without me. I set the shears down and leaned against the counter, the weight of the text crashing over me like cold water. Then, as if my mind needed to torture me further, the memory hit. It was a month ago, during one of those early May mornings when the Charleston air smelled like rain and magnolia. I had just finished arranging peonies when my mother walked into the shop, elegant as always, her smile sharp as a knife. She didn't waste time. "Celine, we need to talk," she said, voice tight, eyes avoiding mine. I wiped my hands and waited. "You don't really fit the image we're going for," she continued, tone so polished it cut deeper. "The bridesmaid thing? Maybe it's best you step back." The words sliced through me that day like paper cuts, thin, precise, and somehow more painful because of how politely she delivered them. I'd laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a bad joke, but her face told me it wasn't. Now, a month later, she had made it official. Not only was I not standing beside her, I wasn't welcome at all. I walked slowly to the back of the shop, shutting off the lights one by one, letting the shadows creep in as the sun dipped below the Charleston skyline. My legs felt heavier with each step, my chest tightening as my mind kept replaying that message. How did I get here? How did I become the outsider in my own family? My mind flashed back to the countless nights I stayed up, covering rent when Mom was short, helping my sister Aurelia clean up her messes, taking care of everyone while no one ever thought to check if I was okay. And now, I was nothing more than a liability in their perfect little narrative. My phone buzzed again. Aurelia had posted a photo on Instagram. The perfect family wedding, no drama, just love. The caption sliced deeper than any text. The picture? My mother, Aurelia, and a circle of smiling bridesmaids laughing under Charleston's soft evening glow. I wasn't in it. I wasn't even mentioned. That's when something inside me shifted. Something quiet, heavy, but sharp. I locked the shop, the keys cold against my palm. My footsteps echoed on the pavement as I walked home, every sound amplified in the thick, humid night. By the time I reached my apartment, I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt hollow. Standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection like I was looking at a stranger. My voice cracked the silence when I whispered, "If they've erased me, maybe it's time I erase them too." No more waiting to be invited. No more hoping for crumbs. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing until exhaustion finally dragged me under. The next morning, I woke up to a name I hadn't heard in months lighting up my phone. The name glowing on my phone screen stopped me cold. Junia. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since that last family dinner, where she quietly slid me an extra plate and murmured, "You shouldn't let them treat you like this." She was the only one who ever looked me in the eye when the rest of them pretended I wasn't even there. So when her name popped up at 7 in the morning, I already knew it wasn't good. I answered anyway. "Junia?" Her voice came through, hushed, almost apologetic. "Celine, I didn't want to be the one to say this, but Mom asked me to call you." My stomach dropped. "She wanted me to make sure you don't show up today," Junia continued quickly, as if ripping off a Band-Aid. "She said it's better for everyone's peace." There it was. That phrase again. Peace. As if my existence had ever disturbed theirs, like a storm cloud ruining their sunny little world. I didn't respond right away. I let the words settle in the silence, heavy and sharp. "Message received," I finally said, my voice flat. Junia tried to soften the blow. "Celine, I don't agree with her. You don't deserve this." But I'd already tuned her out. It wasn't about whether I deserved it anymore. They'd made their decision. After the call ended, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the sunlight slicing through the blinds. Outside, Charleston was stirring awake, church bells ringing, birdsong floating on the breeze, the hum of wedding preparations everywhere. It was supposed to be my mother's perfect day, and apparently it required me to vanish. The walls of my apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too heavy. I grabbed my keys and jacket without thinking, needing to move, to breathe, to not feel the weight of that phone call pressing on my chest. I drove aimlessly through the streets of Charleston, past tourists holding coffee cups, couples in pastel clothes, friends gathering for a celebration I was explicitly uninvited to. Every corner of this city held some memory of me, Every street whispered of the years I spent holding my family's pieces together. And now I wasn't even an afterthought. I don't know what made me do it, but before noon, I found myself parked across the street from the Belmont Hotel, the wedding venue. I had no intention of going inside, but curiosity is a cruel thing. It doesn't let you look away when you should. So I stood there, arms crossed tightly over my chest, and watched. Guests arrived in clusters, laughing, posing for photos. Everyone perfectly dressed, perfectly happy. And then I saw her. My mother. Drusilla moved through the crowd like a queen, her veil pinned perfectly, her smile rehearsed. She was speaking to the hotel manager, but her voice carried across the street, slicing through the morning like glass. "If she sets foot in here, throw her out. She's not family." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The words hit harder than I expected, like a punch to the ribs. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her turn away like I was nothing but a shadow. After a few long minutes, I finally climbed back into my car, the numbness crawling over me like a second skin. I drove without direction, the streets of Charleston blurring past. Hours slipped away without me noticing. By the time the sun began to fall behind the skyline, I found myself at the waterfront. The boardwalk was nearly empty now, a few tourists lingering, the sound of seagulls fading into the breeze. I walked slowly toward the edge of the beach, the tide stretching out like something soft and cruel at the same time. And standing there, with the horizon burning gold in front of me, it finally hit me. They'd spent years carving out their perfect little world, and when I didn't fit their picture, they erased me. Fine. If they wanted me gone, I could disappear. But not on their terms. I took one long breath, letting the ocean air settle deep in my lungs. If they wanted me erased, I whispered to no one, I'll vanish, but on my own terms. That night, back in my apartment, the ache in my chest hadn't disappeared, but it felt different, heavier, sharper. And finally, I reached for the envelope Caspian had left me weeks ago, the one I'd ignored, unopened, because I wasn't ready to face whatever truth it carried. I broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. And everything changed. I unfolded the envelope with the kind of care you'd give to something fragile, something dangerous. Caspian's handwriting stared back at me, clean, precise, almost clinical. Inside was a copy of a marriage contract. At first glance, it looked like any formal agreement. Typed lines, neat signatures, legal jargon designed to put people to sleep. But as I read, my pulse started to pound in my ears. There it was, buried deep in the clauses. Upon the completion of marriage, all shared assets, including the family estate and financial holdings, would fall solely under the control of Silas Wren, my mother's soon-to-be husband. A quiet breath slipped past my lips. I read it again, slower this time, tracing each word like I was peeling back the skin of a wound. My name wasn't there. Aurelia's name wasn't there. Only theirs, Drusilla and Silas, binding themselves together in a contract that effectively erased both her daughters from the picture. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This wasn't some emotional fallout or family spat. This was calculated. I leaned back on my sofa, the soft hum of the ceiling fan suddenly too loud in the silence. My mind swirled, images flashing, the cold text from Mom, Aurelia's picture-perfect Instagram post, the public rejection outside the Belmont Hotel. It wasn't personal, it was business. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. I needed air. Pulling on a sweatshirt, I stepped outside into the Charleston night. The humidity clung to my skin like sweat, the streets mostly empty except for the occasional car rolling by. I walked without thinking, down streets I'd memorized over the years, until I reached the little cafe Caspian and I used to meet at after late shifts. That's when the memory hit. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had dropped by Mom's house to deliver floral samples she asked for. She wasn't home, but the front door was unlocked. I'd walked in, placed the samples on the kitchen counter, and noticed the study door slightly ajar. Out of habit, curiosity, or maybe something more, I peeked inside. That's when I saw it. That same marriage contract sitting on Silas's desk. It had caught my eye not because of the thick stack of legal papers, but because my mother's name was there, without mine or Aurelia's anywhere in sight. Back then, I hadn't thought much of it. I was used to being overlooked, but now, standing in the middle of an empty street, it all clicked like dominoes falling. Caspian's voice echoed in my head from a conversation weeks ago when he'd warned me. Celine, Silas did this before. 2 wives, both left with nothing but bills and heartbreak. I hadn't wanted to believe him then. I wanted to believe my mother wouldn't fall for a man who'd used, drained, and discarded women like expired credit cards. But that contract in my hand proved otherwise. I walked home slower than usual, my steps heavy with realization. By the time I reached my apartment, the ache inside me had sharpened into something colder. They didn't just leave me off the guest list. They'd left me off the entire future they were building. One where I didn't exist. Not just emotionally, but legally, financially, permanently. Every little slight, every offhand comment over the years, every time Mom brushed past me in favor of Aurelia, they weren't accidents. They were conditioning. They wanted me gone long before this wedding. The wedding was just the final act. I dropped onto the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling fan slicing the air. They didn't just erase me, they sold me out. Somewhere beneath the dull ache in my chest, something cracked open. Not sadness, not grief. Anger. Real, bone-deep, unshakable anger. For the first time in years, I let it settle in my veins like a spark waiting for flame. This isn't over. The next morning, a new rumor about me started spreading like wildfire. And I knew exactly who lit the match. The rumor spread like wildfire, faster than I expected, but exactly how I should have known it would. By noon, 3 different people had sent me the same message, as if I hadn't already heard it whispered beneath the breath of every family member who smiled too wide and cared too little. Celine's unstable. She threatened to ruin the wedding. She's out of control. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't felt so familiar. The way my family always twisted the truth until it became a weapon. At first, I thought about letting it burn itself out. Let them talk. Let them paint me as the villain. But then Junia texted, "You should come tonight. Rehearsal dinner at the Belmont. Be seen." I stared at the screen, wondering why I should even bother. Why walk straight into the lion's den when I already knew they wanted me mauled? But something inside me, something sharp and stubborn, told me I needed to show up, not to explain, not to plead, but to remind them I was still standing. That evening, the Belmont was glowing like a Christmas postcard, white lights strung around the columns, waiters gliding between tables with trays of champagne, everything curated to look perfect. I slipped in quietly, unnoticed at first, but eyes always find you when they want you to disappear. Caspian found me near the doorway. He didn't say much, just gave me that look, half warning, half worried. "You sure?" he asked under his breath. "They don't get to write my ending," I replied. The evening unfolded like a play. Laughter where it belonged, fake smiles exchanged like business cards. Until the groom took the microphone. Silas stood tall, smug, one arm casually draped around my mother, like he already owned her. And everything else. "To family," he started, voice honey-sweet. "Those who know when their time is over." The guests laughed, politely, nervously, but his eyes locked on mine when he added, "Some people just don't know when they're no longer needed." The smile never left his lips, but the message hit like a slap. I kept my face still, my hand tight around the glass. Then my mother took the mic. "Every mother dreams of children who bring them joy," she said sweetly. "Sadly, we don't always get what we want." Her eyes didn't leave mine. The room went silent. No one said a word. Caspian leaned in. "They're trying to break you tonight," he whispered. I set my glass down carefully and stood. The chatter faded. Forks paused midair. I walked toward the exit without looking back, until I did. My voice stayed calm even. "Be careful," I said, meeting both their eyes. Even shadows have limits. And then I left. Outside, Charleston felt like a different world. The hum of traffic, the quiet pulse of life moving forward like nothing had happened inside that ballroom. I kept walking, letting the air cool the weight pressing on my chest. At the corner, beneath the street lamp glow, I stopped and breathed it all in. That night, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, something inside me shifted. The next move would be mine. And this time, I wouldn't play nice. 3 days before the wedding, my phone lit up before sunrise. The city outside my window was still dark, the air heavy with the kind of stillness that only comes right before something terrible happens. When I reached for the phone, half expecting another empty apology or a cold demand, I found Caspian's name instead. His message was short. "Aurelia's telling people you're trying to ruin the wedding." I sat up, the weight of those words sinking straight to my stomach like a stone. Of course she was. It wasn't enough to exclude me. Now they needed to burn my name, too. I stared at the screen, rereading the message over and over as if it would suddenly make sense. It didn't. By mid-morning, I saw the evidence for myself. 2 posts, subtle but clear enough if you knew how to read between the lines. One from one of Aurelia's friends. "Some people really can't stand seeing others happy." Another from a distant cousin. "Family drama is exhausting. Let people celebrate without your baggage." I didn't need a name tagged to know who they meant. I spent the next hour pacing the length of my living room, the same sentence rattling in my head like static. "She's telling everyone you're trying to ruin the wedding." It was the final push. Not Mom, not Silas. Aurelia. The person I thought would at least hesitate before driving the knife in. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed her number. She picked up after the second ring. "Celine," Aurelia said, voice cool like the static buzz of a radio signal I'd forgotten how to tune. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, skipping past the small talk, my throat tight with something dangerously close to grief. She didn't miss a beat. "You're jealous, Celine. You always have been." I blinked, the words slicing sharper than I expected. "You hate seeing Mom happy," she continued, like she'd been rehearsing the line for weeks. "You can't stand not being the center of attention." The laugh that escaped me wasn't soft. It was bitter, hollow. "You really believe that?" "You can't help yourself," she said. "You live for chaos." I swallowed the lump forming at the back of my throat, my hand tightening around the edge of the kitchen counter. She meant every word. She wasn't saying it to provoke me. She genuinely believed I was the villain in her story. We ended the call without resolution, her voice turning cold, mine turning to ice. That evening, after I closed the shop and the streets began to empty, my phone buzzed again. "Aurelia," one message this time, no flourish, no pretense. "If you really love Mom, you won't show up. Don't ruin her day." I stared at it longer than I should have, the words sinking into my bones like frostbite. "If you really love Mom," as if love meant stepping aside quietly while they erased me. I set the phone down, walked to the window, and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. I'd spent years making myself smaller so they could feel big. I'd spent even longer hoping they'd eventually see me. But this wasn't misunderstanding anymore. It was strategy. I walked back to the counter, picked up my phone, and typed slowly, deliberately. "If you keep pushing me out, don't be surprised when I stop staying quiet." I hit send and set the phone face down. Tomorrow, they'd understand what it meant when the quiet one finally spoke. The cafe was quiet when I arrived the next morning. One of those downtown places tucked between old brick buildings, smelling faintly of espresso and polished wood. The kind of place where no one paid attention to you unless you asked for it. Caspian was already there, seated at a corner table, a manila folder resting on the table like a loaded weapon. He glanced up when I walked in, and without a word, slid the folder toward me as I sat down. I pulled it open, expecting receipts or half-hearted gossip. But it wasn't that. Inside were copies of documents I hadn't seen before. Detailed records. a full copy of the marriage contract I'd first glimpsed weeks ago, but this time annotated, highlighted, and stapled neatly behind it were bank statements, court records, legal filings, a trail of Silas's past, 2 former marriages, 2 women left in financial ruin, assets transferred quietly, systematically. I scanned the pages, my heart pounding faster with every line I read. My mother's name, the date of the wedding, the clause that effectively gave Silas control of everything, including what should have been mine and Aurelia's inheritance. When I looked up, Caspian was watching me carefully, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. "Because someone should have protected you a long time ago." I swallowed, unsure how to carry the weight of that simple truth. "You've spent your whole life cleaning up their mess," Caspian continued. "Maybe it's time to clean your own slate." The words settled over me like an anchor. Heavy, grounding. For years, I'd been the one who showed up. The one who fixed things. The one who swallowed her pride so everyone else could save face. Maybe it was time to stop playing that part. I folded the folder closed carefully, like sealing something fragile, and stood. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. He nodded once. "Whatever you do next, don't do it for them. Do it for you." I left the cafe and walked back to my apartment, the folder clutched tight in my hands. The sun was high by then, the streets humming with people preparing for the wedding weekend. Delivery trucks, florists, caterers rushing in and out of venues. Charleston was dressing itself up for a show I was never supposed to be in. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen for a long time. And then, without hesitation, I picked up the phone and called my family's lawyer. It took 3 rings before he answered, his voice formal but polite. "Celine? What can I do for you?" I told him everything. I sent him the documents Caspian had gathered, every highlighted line, every damning clause. I explained the pattern, the way it had happened before, the way it was happening again. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. "You understand what you're asking me to do," he said carefully. "I do. You're aware this could tear your family apart?" I almost laughed. That ship had sailed a long time ago. "I want this marriage stopped," I said calmly, "and I want them to know exactly why." The lawyer hesitated. "I can prepare an injunction, but it will cause a public scene." "Good. Let it be public. Let the truth crawl out into the light." Before we ended the call, I added one last thing. "Make sure they can't erase me this time." That night, I slept differently. Not well, but with a strange kind of calm, like something inside me had finally settled. The next day, as the guests arrived in their finest clothes, the first cracks in their perfect day started to show. By noon, the Belmont Hotel looked like something out of a Southern wedding magazine. Pristine white arches, silk ribbons fluttering in the breeze, and guests arriving in their finest clothes, sipping champagne, as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. But I knew better. From the window of the cafe across the street, I watched them arrive. Uncles in pressed suits, cousins in pastel dresses, old family friends lining up to witness the show. They had no idea the curtain was about to fall. Inside the hotel ballroom, my mother stood radiant under the chandelier light, veil pinned perfectly, lips stretched into a smile wide enough to crack. Silas stood beside her, smug and polished as ever, one hand resting possessively on her back. The picture of happiness, if you didn't look too close. Somewhere behind them, Caspian lingered near the back of the room, his posture casual, but his gaze sharp, scanning every corner like he was waiting for the sky to cave in. It didn't take long. The first sign came in the form of 2 men in dark suits slipping past the crowd, moving straight toward the front. I saw the shift ripple across the room, whispers, heads turning, the tension sharp enough to slice through silk. One of the men, our family lawyer, approached my mother, leaning in close enough that only she and Silas could hear. The smile slid right off her face. Silas's jaw clenched so hard I could see it from across the street. The announcement came minutes later. The wedding ceremony had been temporarily delayed due to unforeseen legal circumstances. I almost laughed at how politely they phrased it, as if this wasn't a bomb dropped in the middle of their perfect day. The whispers spread like wildfire. By the time I crossed the street and slipped quietly into the hotel lobby, the ballroom was already unraveling. Guests shuffled uneasily, murmuring behind cupped hands. Phones were out, messages flying faster than the waitstaff could refill the champagne. And then the doors to the side hallway burst open. Silas stormed in, his face red, voice rising over the chaos. "This is her!" he shouted, pointing toward me like I was a criminal on trial. "She planted this! This is her revenge." Eyes turned toward me like floodlights. I didn't flinch. I met his gaze evenly, the calm in my chest unfamiliar but steady. People were recording now. I could see the glint of phones held up like shields, capturing every moment. Aurelia's voice came next, sharp and brittle over the crowd noise. She wasn't even in the room. It was a voicemail buzzing on my phone seconds after Silas's outburst. "You ruined everything," she snapped. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed the only family you had left." I listened to it twice, letting the words wash over me like cold rain. The thing about blame is that it always finds the easiest target. Junia's message came not long after. "They're all blaming you," she wrote. "But you did the right thing." Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to believe her. But in that moment, standing in the middle of the wreckage, all I felt was exhaustion. I thought it was over. I thought the worst had passed. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the front of the room. My mother had grabbed the microphone. The air in the ballroom felt heavier the moment my mother's fingers wrapped around the microphone. Her smile was gone, her posture stiff. It wasn't the poised, gracious host everyone had seen earlier. It was a woman unraveling, thread by thread, in front of an audience too stunned to look away. I stood frozen near the back, breath caught halfway in my throat. She cleared her throat, voice slicing through the nervous murmurs like broken glass. "You all came here today," she began, her tone shaking but forced into something sweet. "To witness love, to celebrate new beginnings." Some people nodded politely, unsure where this was going. "But what no one tells you," she continued, voice rising, "is that family isn't always what it looks like in pictures." A pause, a shift. Her gaze snapped to me across the room, sharp as a blade. "From the moment she was born," my mother said, her voice cracking but clear, "Celine has been nothing but a burden." The words hit harder than I expected, like someone had knocked the wind clean out of me. The entire ballroom fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop between the gasps and uncomfortable shuffling. For a moment, I swore the chandelier above us flickered, like even the lights couldn't stand what was happening. Somewhere near the front, Caspian's jaw tightened. Junia stood frozen, her phone forgotten in her hand. I could feel everyone's eyes shift to me. The invisible daughter, the problem child, now painted plainly for all to see. I don't know how long I stood there, my heart pounding loud in my ears, before something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not even in sadness, just finality. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked slowly, deliberately, toward the front of the room. The crowd parted like water. When I reached the edge of the dance floor, I looked up at my mother, who still clutched the microphone like it was the only thing holding her up. "You wanted me erased?" I said, my voice steady, clear. "Congratulations!" I stepped back, sweeping my gaze across the stunned, whispering guests. "I'm gone." Without waiting for her reply, without so much as a glance toward Silas or Aurelia, I turned and walked away. The sound of my heels on the marble echoed louder than the shocked silence. Outside, the Charleston sun had begun to sink, the sky awash in amber and lavender streaks. The evening breeze wrapped around me like a promise of something better. By the time I reached the street, I heard the commotion behind me, more shouting, more chaos. But none of it mattered anymore. Later that night, I heard the rest through text messages and voicemails I didn't bother answering. Silas had left immediately after the ceremony collapsed. vanishing without a trace, taking with him whatever was left of their carefully curated fairy tale. The guests had scattered, many of them whispering about betrayal, scandal, bad blood. My mother's phone, according to Junia, had been ringing nonstop with reporters, relatives, friends who suddenly didn't want to be associated with the disaster. Aurelia didn't reach out, not a word, not even another blame-laced voicemail. Everything they'd built, the image, the performance, the illusion, crumbled in one afternoon. And I'd walked away from the wreckage without looking back. Weeks later, I received one last message, and it wasn't from the person I expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the message came. The sky over Charleston was gray that day, heavy with the kind of spring rain that threatened but never quite fell. I was sorting through invoices at my desk, half listening to a podcast playing low in the background, when my phone buzzed against the wooden surface. It was from Aurelia. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it. "Mom's not doing well. She keeps talking about you." That was all it said. No apology, no anger, no punctuation. Just a sentence hanging like an unfinished thought. I set the phone down and leaned back, feeling the weight of those words settle in my chest like wet sand. For weeks after the wedding collapsed, I hadn't heard a thing from either of them. I thought that silence was the end. Apparently, it wasn't. That evening, I met Caspian at a small bar near the waterfront. He slid into the booth across from me, a file tucked beneath his arm. Without a word, he passed it over. Inside was a USB drive and a short printed transcript. "One of the old housekeepers sent this to me," he explained quietly. "She thought you should know." I plugged the drive into my laptop when I got home. The recording wasn't long, just under 3 minutes, but it felt like a punch to the stomach. My mother's voice, unmistakable, cold as ice, even on tape. "Celine's unstable. She ruins everything she touches. That's why I had to keep her away." The same lie, the same cruel branding, only this time spoken casually, to someone she thought didn't matter. That's where it started. The whispers, the rumors, the unspoken explanation that made it easier for people to justify my absence at every family gathering, every milestone. Not because I was difficult, but because it was easier to believe I was broken. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dim light, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't destroy me. It just made everything make sense. A few days later, I drove out to the old neighborhood, past streets that used to feel like home. I parked a block away from my mother's building, stepped out, and stood there for a long time, staring at the front door I'd walked through 1,000 times before. But I didn't go in. There was nothing left to say. Somewhere between the betrayal and the lies, and the years of bending myself into shapes that would never be enough, I'd finally stopped needing her to see me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes, it just means letting yourself live again. Before I left, I pulled out my phone and typed one last message. "I hope one day you can be happy without needing to hurt me first." I didn't wait for a reply. Weeks passed. The city moved on, the gossip faded, the scandal became old news, and I started over. I reopened my flower shop, smaller this time, tucked into a quieter street, where the customers came not because of who I used to be, but because of what I could offer now. Caspian stopped by often, usually with coffee. Junia sent pictures of her kids, messages filled with laughter and updates. A different kind of family. One I chose. Some wounds don't heal perfectly, but they stop bleeding eventually. That evening, as I locked up the shop and stepped outside into the cool Charleston night, I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally knew it didn't have to be. For so long, I believed that family meant sacrificing yourself to keep the peace, that if I bent far enough, stayed quiet long enough, maybe one day they'd finally see me. But here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when the room is empty. who listens without expecting you to shrink yourself to fit their story. Walking away wasn't easy. It never is. But peace doesn't come from waiting for people who keep proving they don't value you. It comes from finally valuing yourself. And now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed too long in a place, a relationship, a family that kept asking you to be less just so they could feel more? What would happen if, for once, you chose yourself? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story made you stop and think about your own boundaries. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story traveled. And if this story wasn't for you, that's okay too. Let me know why. Your voice matters here. And if you want to hear more real stories about family, love, loss, and finding yourself again, hit that subscribe button and join this little community we're building. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find a place where we belong.